And our next one will be April 4th after
Yes.
state information.
Budget?
Oh, that was the same one.
All right,
Nope.
I apologize. Yes.
Okay.
The floor is yours. Just for the record, then, for the record, continuation of the board budget presentation, which originally was March 7th.
Yes.
We started it. There was a power outage. We had to vacate, and so it ended. So I think you're going to kind of start from the beginning,
Sure.
but maybe go a little bit faster.
Should I start from the
point
beginning?
where-
We can't just start from where we...
Up until the point where we.
Okay. I'll do a quick recap of, I guess, what we covered. And as you can see, we still left March 7th there, so for all practical purposes, we're still kind of stuck in time there. Again, the budget's driven by our goals, programmatic, enrollment, demographics. We do have issues of capital, and one of the things we're dealing with are external factors of assessment changes within the district. Our assessments have dropped and will continue to drop. Within the existing staff, there will be new elective opportunities at the high school and middle school. We are piloting a UPK program, a viola. There are 2 teachers in for that. New special ed classes, we're bringing children back primarily from BOCES placements. And we're also changing some learning spaces, really K-8. All those buildings are getting some changes which are being funded through the budget. We'll get into those. As far as operations and facilities improvements, it's the last phase of our network upgrade. There's money in the budget to finalize that. We are going to, starting with this budget, we're going to keep recommending that each year we do a small project of about $100,000, mainly because those needs are always there, and also because the state gives an incentive that they'll give you the aid the next year on 1 project a year if it's $100,000 or less. So as it turns out, the Viola PA system is our most needy, and it'll come in around that amount of money. We also have a little over $600,000 in the budget itself, for the replacement of the roof over the high school pool, which did realize some damage in recent windstorms. And we also are going to refurbish the high school pool, which is something that needs to be done every dozen or so years. We're going to drain the pool, recoat it, also paint the pool exterior, the whole room, as well as the gym is going to be redone at the high school. So the high school is going to be getting a lot of TLC. Over the last 5 years, really, how we budget in schools has changed. The tax levy used to be the last thing you would know. Now it's the first thing you know, or at least the maximum tax levy is the first thing you know. So we know this before we even start looking at the cost of programs or anything else, because it's driven by CPI, and right now that's about the 5th line down, the blue, 1.26%. So it is less than a 2% CPI. We have no growth factor this year. That's why the first number is 1.00 in blue. So really that 1.26 yields about a 1.2% tax levy increase, because our debt is pretty much the same. So we know the maximum tax levy we can go out for without requiring a supermajority is a 1.2% increase. And we did build the budget using that full increase. As with all public schools, the largest expenditures are salary and benefits. This provides for contractual increases for all our staff. All our staff have contracts, so we don't have to guesstimate what potential increases will be. This moves people. There are a few retirements that are factored that we already know about. But for the most part, it's keeping existing staff in place outside of those changes. We'll go through some of the specific line items. Benefits, kind of a tale of 2 cities. A decrease in retirement costs offsets a large increase in health insurance, fortunately, because the first thing we heard was the health insurance. But fortunately, the retirement system rates are going to offset that. And here you can see it, 7% increase in health. But the total increase in benefits only 2% because those other areas are going down, primarily TRS and ERS. And again, since we covered these before, here we didn't even have to scale the bar charts to make them look like big changes, even using 13 million as a base. These are very large changes. And we did want to show you what a rate is that we're paying. For family coverage, the district covers 85% for both individual and family, and the rates are now for next year, actually for 2017, factoring in. We're factoring in a growth for 2018 too, so we're actually looking at rates that are going to be pushing $30,000 for a family, of which we're covering 85%. Special education, there were two areas of growth last year when we started the budget, special ed and transportation, and in both cases we not only slowed the growth, but we actually were able to bend the curve down a little bit. Reason for special ed, really by bringing in higher cost students into the district that are currently being served in BOCES and private settings. That's saving the district money even after factoring in the cost of staff. And we had looked at our physical therapy costs, which have been growing, but we feel a 1-0 employee can cover the needs at a much cheaper rate than we're currently paying through as an itinerant through BOCES, mainly because we're being charged for travel time and not really getting all the efficiencies. So those two are really the main reason for our special ed reductions. And you could see we were on a clip of growing expenditures and big jump in 15-16, but 16-17 and 17-18 have really slowed the growth down there. And again, we're going quickly through this because these were covered before the power went out.
Excuse me.
Yep.
I'm over here. Hello.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes. Voices, yeah, yes.
I do have questions about special ed, but I
Sure.
can wait until the end.
That's all right, we're here. What do you want?
Because I have, since the presentation, heard some concerns from people about special ed. The first one is, do the parents have a right to refuse their child coming back?
Well, I'll defer. I mean, everything goes through a CSE process, so the parents are part of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, the parents have the same rights under the Part 200 regulations they have for any special education placement. They have the right to say no.
They have the right to say no and say they
Always.
want to continue.
Parent always
BOCES.
does,
And
absolutely.
then pendency rules, right?
Right. Yeah, just
that
like,
you stay in
there's no difference between a BOCES placement versus an in-district placement versus a private placement. The parent always has the same rights.
Okay, and then the training of, will there need to be additional training of our teachers who accept some of these special, so is that, how long does it take for that training? Is that costly? Is that, how efficient is it going to be?
I don't have the specifics on exactly how long the training will be yet, but certainly, we've done this before, where we've created new classes. We've done it very successfully at Montebello in the middle school 3 or 4 years ago. And so, the same training that a teacher in a BOCES setting would get, is that same training is available to any of our teachers. So our job is to make sure they get it, and that they're prepared to work with the students they have in front of them.
And so we will need to have some of our teachers be trained, receive additional training over the summer for this?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There will be dozens and dozens of teachers across the district who will get training during the summer. I'm sure our special educators will be among those teachers. Yeah.
And how about other resources? Things like the CABAS or the ABA therapy, is that going to be provided at a similar level?
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of staff who are ABA trained and certified now. So it's really going to depend on how many students across the district need that sort of support. We have students who need that sort of support now. So there really isn't any huge difference. We're not talking about bringing back dozens of children. For the most part, we're talking about students who are already in our schools now. They just happen to be attending a BOCES class in one of our schools, and we're paying tuition to BOCES for that to happen. There's no reason why we can't provide a high-quality education to those students who are already here.
Okay, and what about the ancillary services, like will there need to be additional, nursing supervision, or will the nurses have an increased workload that they will need to have more time?
No, remember, the nurses are already supporting those students who are in our buildings anyway. If you're a student in a
Right, the students
BOCES...
that are in the building currently, but the BOCES
Sure.
students that you're planning on bringing back, sometimes they have increased nursing needs as well,
Right, but
which can be
remember,
quite significant.
The point is, most of these students are already in our schools anyway. So if you're a BOCES student at Cherry Lane, you're being supported by the Cherry Lane nurse. Now you'll just be supported by the Cherry Lane nurse while you're in a Ramapo Central classroom and not a BOCES classroom. So there's no difference in terms of nursing needs. Part of the benefit, so to speak, of a reduced enrollment at the elementary level is that we have related service providers who have time to pick up additional students. These will be among the additional students.
Okay, and I can't read my own handwriting. Oh,
So I
Okay.
so
Well,
Norris,
we're
I have
here
something.
when and if you can.
Well, I have something too. So I think what we're looking at, what was sent to us today was from SEPTA. And I think I noticed you weren't copied on it, so I don't know if it was forwarded to you. I think it was sent to us and Dr. Adams. I guess the key thing here is, can we get these same answers that you're giving to the SEPTA group? And,
Sure,
and
I know that the
let them
PPS
know that their concerns are being addressed and that will be taken care of.
Yeah, I know the PPS administration is in regular contact with the SEPTA leaders, so we'll make sure that they
Yeah,
get those
there's a list of
questions and
about
answers.
10 or 12 questions in this email that I think will maybe make them feel a little bit better and put them at ease a little bit, because we already have BOCES classes in our buildings, we already have BOCES teachers, BOCES
absolutely.
students, teachers taking care of them, I mean nurses taking care of them. I just think that there were just some other questions too as to why the reduction, and I think some of those answers will help.
Right, and again, I would point out, if you go back a slide, Anthony,
Yeah.
maybe 2 slides, we saw a reduction about 4 years ago, because we've done this before. You know, periodically, we look at our programming, our staff, and again, part of that reduced enrollment at the elementary level is it frees up staff and allows us to be creative with special educators. Instead of accessing special educators, we decided, you know what, let's do something different that supports the needs of students, and it happens to have the benefit of lowering the amount of money that the public pays to BOCES. So to us, it's a win all the way around.
And I guess finally, I would just ask, so it's not, we're not looking at, how many students approximately would you say we're looking at?
10, maybe 12,
So
most of whom are already in our schools anyway.
clearly, if there was a need for additional psychologists or any other position, PT, OT, whatever it may be, that will be taken care of based on the needs, because that's based on the IEP.
Right.
So I just want to make sure, okay,
Mhm.
so that's all some of
Mhm.
this as well.
Yeah, remember,
Thank you.
again, to point, we've done this before, we do this regularly, there's really there's no substantial difference here, we're not overhauling our special education programming,
Right.
we're creating a couple of new classrooms.
Okay, I have a couple of questions on that topic, Steve. I actually was in attendance in the last special education PTA meeting last Monday, so some of these, I haven't had a chance to read the email yet, but some of that came up in the meeting, obviously. One concern was how many students will be in the classroom, how many classrooms are we constructing for these students? So in other words, the density, I heard you say 10 to 12, that's not in one classroom, I'm assuming?
No, two classrooms.
Divided on 2 classrooms, okay, so I wanted to verify that, because I did share that we were told 7 last time, and I shared I didn't hear 15 in one classroom, that wasn't the case.
No.
The other concern was some students that actually have been getting services outside, the parents have already received correspondence to the fact that they're going to be moved in district. The concerns about that, will they be able to get the same level of services when historically those services have not been provided here? And the other concern is what happens in the summer months when they normally are able to go to those programs, and now we don't have that in the summer.
We have students in district now who get 10-month special education services in one of our schools and then go to BOCES or another placement for their summer services. That would remain unchanged. Any parent always has the right to say, I prefer one placement over another. That's part of the right that any parent has. But in my experience, having done this in terms of special education programming in multiple districts, it's very rare for large numbers of parents to say, I don't want my child in his or her home school.
I shared
Folks
that,
move
that
here
you told
and-
us that most parents prefer their children
Yeah.
to be here, but some of the parents present didn't feel that way. So I want to make sure that the final say is not going to be to force the child to come back against the parents' will. We will give them, as an administration, the evaluation we see, and what we see is going to be provided, and that we feel is suitable, and it's up to the parent at the end to make that decision.
Yeah, at no point have you ever heard any member of the administration say that we don't respect the opinions and the rights of parents. It's not what we do, and would remain unchanged in this case as well.
So we're reassuring our parents the final say is for the parent. Thank you.
And full year services are also determined by the IEP. I know
This is
because
all
my
driven by the
son
CSE,
had
absolutely.
full year services almost his entire time in this district. And it was
Absolutely.
never denied based on the needs of the student. And that's still the same, and that will still continue.
We bring students back here from BOCES all the time. We celebrate it. It's something that is it's a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of as an administrator, to celebrate with families and with teachers when kids have achieved success and are able to return to their home school. So we do this regularly. This is not something that necessarily new. It's just grouping them in two classrooms.
So we're also aware that we can't serve every child depending on those needs, as best as another location at times. So there are,
That's why
depending
we're
on
still,
their
we're still
needs.
budgeting over $11 million in tuition and related services for students who will be serviced outside of the school district. So that will always be the case.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next area, functionally, transportation. Again, this is an area historically growing much greater than CPI. Slowed down the growth, and actually you see a decrease, primarily by coordinating the non-public and public school calendars. So we're only transporting on days the public schools are open. We eliminated multiple bell times for drop-offs, and we did do some consolidation with some of our neighbors for both non-public and special ed routes, where a number of districts were all going to the same school, and we're kind of joining to save, realize those costs. We're charged by child from BOCES instead of by bus, so we're able to share those costs. Same kind of story as with special ed. You'll see years of growth, 500,000 pretty much a year over the last 4 or 5 years, and now for 17-18 we're seeing that slowing down and going in a good direction. So we think these are achievable long-term. This growth has slowed down, and we can keep it at these kind of levels with just now normal growth on that base. Buildings and grounds, even though you see a large increase there, there's really two reasons. We have about $240,000 is due to the painting of the pool area, painting of the gym, which are one-time expenses, but also if you looked at what we were actually spending in B&G over time, it was closer to what we're budgeting this year. So we actually feel this is getting us more in line with our actual expenditures. So we think 3.4 million is what you're going to see as the new number to meet our needs. Again, there is an increase in building repair costs, but really the main thing is that we're bringing our budget in line with what we're actually spending in these areas. We do a great job keeping our facilities in line, but we don't see the need to have to do budget transfers. We're just going to plan on it to begin with. And even though this year we're doing the pools, it's a big district. There's always going to be things that are expensive that we take on each year. So we think 3.4 million is our new normal there. Technology, the main reason is there's one-time costs. So we do think this is something that will go back down. So the two areas of growth that you see here, one is a new normal, 3.4, and we think the other is going to bounce back down. So looking at a budget across multiple years, which we are going to eventually show you a 5-year budget, we're planning that out once we get the state aid figures. We do feel good that we have cost containment, and we should have control of these budget lines going forward. Planned balance is something we prudently put in place to pay for the first few months of the year. We wait for our taxes to come in mid-September. We obviously have special ed summer school, and even the first teacher payroll is well before we get our tax money in, so it helps. We don't have to borrow money. If you go to a lot of districts, they talk about tax anticipation notes, borrowing money in anticipation of the taxes. We have not issued those for decades, and I don't see any need that we'd have to do that for the near future. So this provides us the cash flow we need to keep operating. And even though that shows a decrease, really, there was a one-time reason that it went up in 16-17. 2.1 is what's going to be our continual issue here. If you compare the revenues here, we'll go down this revenue chart. Plan balance, there's a slight increase in unclassified revenues, rentals. That's the insurance recovery we're going to use to help partially offset, so that 2.8 going to 3 million. State aid, those are figures from the governor's proposal. We're quite comfortable with those numbers. We think there will probably be a slight increase. And when we first put this together, it was March 7th. Interest income we're going to relook at also when we look at future revenue. There was an increase by the Federal Reserve in interest rates that will positively impact the school district. There was a time interest income was almost $1 million in this district when interest rates were higher. So we think that number will eventually grow also. But if you compare right now, and this was as of March 7th, our revenues and our expenditures were out of balance to the tune of $577,000. So, you know, we expect to close that gap. The budget is kind of an evolutionary process. We expect to hear more on the expense side, and we do expect to hear more from Albany, as well as possibly looking at our interest income. And the April 4th meeting, we're going to close that gap for the board. But, you know, as we put this together, and as we looked at expenses that we wanted to keep, and we looked at a tax cap with a hard 1.2%, you know, now we have to find the revenues to support that budget. There are some things that have come in since, a legal settlement, and some other things that we could also look at for funds. But we think state aid and interest income will be where we get that from. So really that's the revenue story. This is where we kind of were leaving off last time. So everything now is kind of new areas. One-time insurance recovery is why unclassified revenues went up. State aid, we're using the governor's proposal. Building aid has gone up as we've funded more projects recently from the capital reserve. And the use of reserves is the tax certiorari money that we have been required to bring back. As tax certiorari's roll off, we're required, if we had money set aside for them, to bring them back. So this will be one of the last tranches from that $575,000, the 313. Again, we have a budget, and then we also have long-range issues. In 2007, the district voters approved a capital reserve of $8 million. So the district hasn't borrowed money. We don't borrow tax anticipation notes. We don't borrow to improve our buildings. It's a very good story to be able to tout that we have low debt here. The reserve in 2007 funded the things you see there: roofs, Viola Courtyard, turf field, various other improvements. I know also some plumbing work at Sloatsburg. We only have $1.7 million left from that $8 million. We're recommending, but the voters have to agree, the board has to agree, voters have to agree. Air handlers at the high school is almost $1 million. If you go back in time, the board actually approved an architect to design that, because we said that's the next big thing we need to deal with. These are original to the building. We would be compromising you know, the air intakes if we tried to get too many more years out of them. It's time. And then we feel district-wide, with all the technology we're loading into the system and how much we're all dependent on it and the electricity needed, we're recommending generators for the secondary schools and also for Hillburn. Hillburn, because we have a lot of the central servers here, and obviously the high school, middle school are our biggest buildings. Eventually, our goal is to put generators in every building that can at least get through the school day.
What would be the estimated cost for that?
That's about, between all three, $650,000 to $700,000. So about $250,000 per to do that. And it's been a growing need. It was kind of, as we started talking, it's like, yes, we do want the elevator to work too. Yes, we do want, you know. So as you start going down the list of things you want to make sure operate when the power goes out, you know, the generator needs get greater and the costs get greater. We did do a building, we're required every 5 years to do a building condition survey. That was completed actually during 15-16 school year. And the wish list came out to about $17 million, not the wish list, the list of needs for the district. And really none of this is necessarily you know, glitzy. This is meat and potatoes type work. This is roofs primarily. You'll see the list as we go through it. But $17 million is what the needs were listed for the next 7 to 10 years. And even if that, a little sticker shock, I can promise you if you're sitting in other public school districts, they'd be looking at numbers much, much larger than this. So I actually think this is also a sign that the district has kept up their assets, and it's really something we feel we can manage that with a little planning. Where does $17 million go? Roofs are very expensive, and even, 20 years is about 20 to 25 is all you can expect. So, almost half of this is roofs at 3 buildings. So 17 million, 7 million is there. Generators to finish all the elementary schools, fire alarms. You can see the list there, but not too many things that are necessarily you're cutting a ribbon on. It's keeping what we have in good shape and able to last another generation. It's prudence, and our feeling is if we don't plan ahead for it, we'll probably have to do a bond issue or deal with things as they break. So the question is, how can we fund $17 million? We kind of circled the wagons and said, well, how can we do this? In this budget, we have $700,000. So if we do that for 10 years, that's $7 million right there. And since these are needs that go out 10 years, we said, again, without increasing the budget, there's $7 million that's taken care of. Where's the other $10 million comes from? Well, there's a few options. One is to do another capital reserve like it was done in 2007 for $8 million, this time $10 million. If so, there's the $17 million. Our needs are now set. Now the question is, where does the $10 million come from? We have a budget almost $140 million. If 1/2% is unspent every year, which prudence would say there should be, we should plan on having money left over at the end of the year, that will fund $10 million over 10 years. So that's why we're saying not necessarily. We think this will just come from gleaned from operations, and that's really what has occurred over the last decade. That's where the $8 million came from. Each year, the board at the end of the year would be asked to put so many dollars into the capital reserve. Realize there's 2 steps to it, even if the board wanted to go this route. First, the voters have to approve setting up a capital reserve, and then every time you want to spend money in the capital reserve, you have to go back to the voters. So it's not like any district's getting a blank check by setting up a capital reserve. You have to keep going back to the voters to spend the money, and we're obviously recommending that. Other options, if we didn't do a capital reserve, we could bond the full $17 million. Obviously, this would add debt to the district. As a reminder, we're dealing with, we're calling it a little bit of a cliff in that we have debt that's existing that will go on past the state aid related to that debt. That's 2019-20 school year. So this would only compound that problem. Or we could set up a $17 million capital reserve and not put any money in the budget for 10 years. We think that's a little too much to expect to get out of operations. Again, we think we're biting the bullet this year by putting $700,000 in. We can keep that line item flat, and that will achieve $7 million. So that really is our recommendation on how to deal with our needs that are out there. It'll be in slow bite-sized pieces that we will spend the $17 million over the next decade. Only $700,000 is planned to be spent in the next budget. Next steps. Revenue. Yep. Sure. Yep.
Can we go back to the 17 million?
Sure.
All right. So what you've got here is about 12.6.
Okay.
If you want to add in even the projects on your prior screen at 1.7, for the generators and for the.
Well, actually, you shouldn't have to. This would be.
Yeah,
these are the big ticket items. There are definitely, obviously,
I'm just trying to see where we get the 17.
Okay. And I'll. I guess we can give it the next time we have a. Yeah, we'll share this listing with you. Basically, there's pneumatic controls. There's other things, but the list I have here is every building has items, and the bottom line is 17. So this will get to the board obviously before our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, because if I'm looking at this, it's a fairly large discrepancy between 17 and 12 and a half.
Yeah, I hear you. And what you'll see as you get to, and I'm sorry that you don't have this right in your hands now. When you look at the more detail, you'll see like $20,000 for every building for outside lights. Doesn't sound like much, but all of a sudden,
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what. Yeah, they're kind of just smaller ticket
I would
items.
like to. Right. And you have to bring it over now.
Yeah, but that's
details.
yes.
Just
but that's very reasonable.
so you get the full picture.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You got it.
I have a question on the capital.
Yes.
Project. So we know the Suffern High School roof because we've been having discussions about that.
Mhm.
Can you just fill us in on the other schools, other 2 schools' condition, the urgency, and maybe the breakdown?
Again, the urgency, the good thing is, it's not urgent. It's we're putting a 7 to 10 year plan out there. The middle school roof is under warranty for how many more years? And I'm just reaching out to John Palmer because he's here, and 5 more years. So we would expect, we would not do the middle school roof for that. The high school, 4 more years. We're doing about 15% of the high school roof.
Right now.
And 85% of it, we can wait 4 years for. Cherry Lane, same thing, it's under warranty to be 3 to 5 years. So specifically the middle school, 2.4 million is the middle school roof. High school roof is 3, and Cherry Lane 1.2. So.
And we would tackle all those at the same time? Have we prioritized which one first, since they all seem to have the same expectancy?
Well, the great thing is we have the freedom to plan. We're actually doing a little bit of roof work in the next year using a somewhat different system than we've used before. So we kind of want to see how that works. So there might be a reason to buy in bulk. If we like our new system, we might decide to bid it all out at once. But I think it's a little premature to say. I'm not able to answer right now how exactly we'd approach
We would get
that.
back at the 50, almost 50% state aid back
Right.
over 15 years.
Over
for all
15
of them.
years, right.
Unless there's an urgent
Yeah,
matter, like high
right.
school.
Yep. By the way, I just realized like another big chunk here that's not listed there, Hillburn, the roof here has got to be replaced. And that's not on this list, so that's 500,000. Foundation, we have some foundation issues in the front, that's another, so there's almost 900,000 in Hillburn that's not listed there, so, but you'll see that. Good point. So, we know this is a lot, obviously we're hoping to start this discussion March 7th. You know, that we know the needs are there, we know with a little planning we can deal with it. We don't think the district needs debt. And fortunately, we have time. We're not like sitting here going, this has to be done now. We would fund this over, you know, the next 8 or 9 years. We would just look for the authority to fund it. And obviously, we'll have more detail for the board at the next meeting on the capital reserve, as well as closing the budget, reviewing revenues. We shall have more information on retirements. We do have this gap, 577,000, and then we probably should talk a lot more on the capital projects, which we'll do on April 4th, to decide the direction the board wants to go on that. So with that, any summary, that's where we're at as of now. A budget that's slightly less than 2% growth with a tax levy at 1.2. And again, we plan on bringing the gap together in the next few weeks.
I have a few questions.
Of course.
Okay. Number one is clarity for some notes that I think I took last time, but
Yeah.
since it was dark, maybe I wrote them all. When we were talking about buildings and grounds,
Yeah.
what was the estimated cost for the pool
Yes.
and the painting?
Yeah, you're right, because we didn't have it at that point. So, pool room is 140,000. It's pretty much 70,000 for the pool bottom and 70,000 for the walls in the pool. So kind of equal. So 140,000 takes care of that. And the gym, to paint it is $80,000 to paint the entire large gym, and then about another 20,000 to put up new wall padding. So that's about $100,000 in total.
Okay.
80 and 20.
Yeah, I certainly written something other than that.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Thank you for that clarity.
you got it?
I just have some general questions.
Sure.
Can you just walk me through quickly the budget process
Okay. Oh, yeah, thank
in
you.
administration?
You know what? I should have started with that, and I had it on my list, and we had discussed that, so yeah, we meet with every principal. We've asked them to prioritize what do you need done in your building. We obviously get feelings from them about the programmatic needs, and again, every building is having some structural changes done to certain rooms per those requests. We then look at our enrollments. If we don't add UPK, we probably would have less kindergarten sections next year. Right now, that's being filled with the UPK, so that process goes on. We meet with facilities, we meet with transportation, we meet with special education, new placements, how many contingencies should we put in? We added contingencies for special ed monitors. That need seems to be growing over time. So we meet, that's what we're doing in January and February. At the same time, we're going through the mechanics of, let's increase, now Johnny's moved from step 12 to step 13, let's do that. So that we have the mechanical part that's going on, we have meetings about the needs that are out there, programmatic as well as physical, and that really takes up the month of January into early February.
Okay, so just
yeah.
to back it up, the building principals
Yes.
are responsible for the budgets of their respective buildings.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
very much so.
What about down to the department level? Who is actually responsible for line items? When
I would
you're
have to defer to the high
creating
school
budgets-
principals. I know they decentralize it, but
Okay.
unless you, I know it's decentralized. I know
Okay,
they
because
do that. At the,
What,
again, more so it's a secondary school
what
issue.
I'd like to understand
Yeah.
is who in each building is actually reviewing all the different line items for all the different expenditures that happen throughout the year.
Mhm.
Or if you're using more historical data, if you're just using percent increases each year after year on certain items in the, the general ledger.
Mhm.
Clearly there are changes that happen over time.
Yep.
You may have a high cost in postage 10 years ago that you may not have today.
Right.
So I'm curious to know, and if you don't have it now, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I am curious to know who is actually looking at
Mhm.
all these different areas
Yep.
and determining what is the proper cost.
Yeah, and when we're sitting with the principals, we do look across 3 years, so they have that in front of them. For instance, one of the things we know just anecdotally, the textbook line is going down because other things are, being used in lieu of textbooks in some way.
It's
So
interesting that
you can
mentioned
kind of
textbooks.
see that, but we do see, and in certain cases, we end up reducing lines down because we see historically we haven't used them. But as far as what occurs in the building, though, departmentally, I need to get that back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question regarding
Yeah.
Helburn,
Yes.
that was not.
Yeah, it wasn't listed there. Yep.
What is the status of that roof and the foundation you mentioned?
Well, I mean, they both need to be dealt with in the next 5 years. I think the foundation we would deal with first is the general feeling that should be. Yep. We want to, there's a kind of a step process we want to go through. We need to do lead testing. We need to do some other kind of tests that need to be done. So lead as far as the paint before we could do any work. And again, we're not dealing with anything where we structurally right now have a problem. But we do see things that we would be remiss not to put a plan together on. So I think they're looking at some drainage issues out front, because obviously some of it's affected by water. As far as the back roof, where are we at? How many years do we think we can get out of that?
It's been there for quite some time. I think, we've had a couple of leaks, so we're looking at it as far as deterioration of the roof and life expectancy of it, which we're past at that point.
Yeah.
So it needs to be addressed at this.
Yeah, we need to. We're looking at different style roofs too. I know there's at least 2 or 3 different. Being an historic building, I know it's kind of out of the way too. We're kind of limited. We might have to kind of do exactly what's there. Might really be what we have to do, even.
It's going to be dictated as a ship line.
Yeah.
Yeah, are there restrictions that was going to be?
Yeah, SHPO is the organization,
Right.
historic preservation.
You have
So,
to get permission for what's going to be put in.
yeah, we probably will lean to what you see is what you'll continue to see back there, because it's, one, it's out of the way, but 2, we don't think that's where we need to make an architectural statement necessarily. But yeah, we got to definitely protect it, and if we don't do anything, we're going to have a water intrusion issue. So
There were recent renovations done. I noticed the front desk area has been renovated recently. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that type of project, what fund does that come out of?
that's the maintenance budget. That's
That's a regular
consistent.
maintenance.
Yeah,
not a capital fund.
no. When we have to get a building permit, when we have to get an architect involved, that's a capital project. Usually, you're dealing with something that's
Internal.
over $50,000 to $100,000, or it's a structural issue, or, you know, the state wants to see it.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so we have some follow-up back to you.
One more thing, in
Sure.
the past, residents could email questions, is that still available for them? There was a site on
For
the
the budget.
website.
We'll make sure it is. If I can't say right now it's up and running, but that sounds like, we'll make sure that's available as of tomorrow. Yeah, I'll put it right on the website.
Are we on for April 18th, or is that going to change?
4th is our next meeting on budget,
So not the 18th anymore?
and the 18th. 18th is putting it to bed. 4th
Oh, okay.
is, we should have the state budget. We'll,
One tab missing there.
yeah, we'll have more discussion of other revenues, and obviously capital is going to consume a lot of our discussion on the 4th.
Yeah. So April 4th is the next one?
Yeah, next budget meeting. All right, nothing else. Thank you.
What?